Hey guys, the audio was cut off a little bit. All you missed was the plugs at the end. The plugs from Heather were the fact that she's just released her recovery splash that is now live on her website. I have personal experience with this splash and it's excellent, so go check that out. The other plug was for Carve, and the plug was we are actively working on the waitlist and should be ready within the next month or so. Apart from that, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Our guest today was Max Sprecher, and it was an outstanding chat with him. Enjoy. 2, 1, and we are live. Welcome to episode 12 of the Razorburn podcast. I am Jack, of course, and Heather is once again joined to my left, I think, over there. I am delighted, in fact, we are delighted to be joined by Mr. Max Sprecher. How are you doing, Max?
I'm good. Good, Jack. Heather.
Hi.
Hi.
So the interesting thing here is I have been talking up your stuff for a very long time. Well, for at least since I started using it, right?
Yeah, control yourself. Try not to fanboy out too hard, would you?
Yeah, I'll do my best. But I think it's important that people who are watching this get an insight as to kind of like who you are, when you started the razor making. But before we do that, Heather has prepared some questions for you. So take it away, Heather.
Yeah, so if you've ever listened to one of the podcasts before, you know, we like to do, or I like to do some icebreaker questions, and that's just to kind of get things going a little bit. So they're just random questions, nothing too serious. You don't have to like ponder for them. Okay, so I hear that you actually enjoy baking. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so if you had to eat only one carb for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Bread.
Bread. Any kind of bread in particular?
Sourdough.
Sourdough. Yes. Okay.
Bread of the gods.
Yeah, sourdough.
So do you do like the naturally fermented sourdough or?
Yep.
Nice.
How does that process work? I know this isn't a baking podcast, but I'm curious.
Well, it's a pretty lot. I mean, for a lot of people, you know, for me, it's more relaxing, you know, but it's one day, it's a whole day of stretch and fold, and, you know, you got to auto lease, you got to, you know, put everything together. You have to wait until it ferments, and then you got to add your leaven, and then you got to do a lot of stretching and folding. So every half hour, you got to come back and, you know, and then let it rest for another half hour, 45 minutes. And, you know, you got to proof it. That's like a whole day, it's a whole day project. And then it's usually by the time, you know, I start in the morning, pretty early at 8, and then by 5 o'clock, I'm usually done. And then it goes into the fridge until the next day, and then I bake it in the morning.
Wow. So that's like a full day of work.
Yeah. And there's no shortcuts. I mean, you have that's, you know, because you're proofing that bread, you know, you have to really knead it, and the stretching and folding, it will help with the gluten, with building the gluten.
Yeah.
And then of course, you know, then what we call the retard, it goes into the fridge, where it will proof, but because it's in the fridge, it goes very slow, and then you usually leave it for anywhere from around 15 hours. And then in the morning, boom, oven goes in there for 40 minutes, and you're done.
Man, I love bread.
Once you make your own, it's hard to go back to store-bought bread.
Absolutely.
It's so much healthier because you put on your own ingredients. You can, you know, I use organic flour. You know, anything I use is all organic. So, for some reason, I can eat the bread for at least 3 or 4 days without it turning stale. Or you cannot do that with any bread you buy from the store. After two days, it's stale. It starts.
Yeah, it's awful after a couple of days, man. It's not even worth it.
I keep it for 3-4 days, and then, you know, then it's all gone. But,
do you do the fancy shapes?
No, I pretty much I either usually make it round or oval. You know, I have a badminton, which is like a basket, special basket, and I have a round one, and I just have an oval one. I'm also not into the whole, you know, a lot of people like to make these drawings and stuff. And
yeah, they do.
then it's
Interesting.
beautiful to cut. Then you look at it and I'm like, damn, I make a beautiful bread here with a beautiful design, and then you feel like like taking a picture and not even
Yeah.
eating it because.
Yeah, that's the
So,
problem.
so
Yeah.
I'd rather keep it simple. But I do put some toppings. I like putting toppings on there. Being it some dried onions or sesame seed or poppy seed. Um, so that's pretty much the way I make it. So yeah, so if there's one thing, then it would be bread.
Oh, nice. Well, you can't go wrong really with any carbs, but fresh bread is definitely not wasted, that's for sure. Okay, so being a maker, I know this is going to be like a hard question, but would you rather have hooves or claws for hands if you had to pick one?
Hooves or claws?
Yes,
I guess claws.
claws. At least they're semi-functional, right?
Yeah, because you can still grab something,
Yeah.
really grab it, and with hooves, it's more like like you caress something. You can't really hold on to it. So
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Would you rather drift at sea for 2 weeks or spend 2 weeks on the coldest place on Earth?
Oh,
okay, say that again. If I want to,
Yeah, would you rather drift at sea for 2 weeks
okay.
or spend 2 weeks in the coldest place on Earth?
Well, I hate the cold, so I'll take the sea anytime.
Yeah. Yeah, well, being in 'cause you said Las Vegas, right? You're in Las Vegas. So, yeah, you're probably used to the
oh
heat.
man.
I hate the cold. If there's one thing I hate, it's the cold.
Like,
I've had
so
of it in Belgium and growing up, and um, no, I'll take the sea.
I'm gonna say this. I went to visit Max a couple of months ago, and I was boiling my ass off in
Yeah,
Vegas.
Vegas
Right?
is hot.
It was just like, man, this is like the limit of what I can take. And he greeted me at the door by saying, "This is just a warm up." And I was like, well, okay, I don't know if I could live here. But mind you, like, I love the cold, so
Mm,
I
yeah,
can't do the Vegas heat, man.
yeah.
You're a better man than me, Max.
Well, you get used to it, but I mean, plus it's really only. I mean, it's hot, yes, but the worst is 2 months. It's July, August.
Yeah,
That's really the worst. Um, and then after that, it's nice. I mean, we barely. I mean, we get maybe 2 months of rain the whole year. Very little. Um,
yeah, it's not much rain at all down there, is it?
or I mean, it can get below freezing here, but um,
That boggles my mind.
yeah, it's usually 1 or 2 nights where it can go below freezing.
Yeah,
I've had snow here since I've lived here since '06. I've had snow 2 or 3 times.
wow.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I bet that's an
Interesting.
that's
experience.
an experience. Yeah, first time I had snow was it was in the beginning when I just moved here. It does seem that the winters are getting milder and milder. I have been noticing
Yeah,
we are getting warmer and warmer winters. I don't know if it's the climate change they're talking about but there's definitely something going on because um, it's very strange. I've had cactus start flower like in January, which is weird.
Hmm.
that's crazy.
Because usually the first flowers start, the blooms start at end of, I mean, usually it's March, around March. So to have cactus flower in January, that's normal.
Yeah.
No.
I bet snow doesn't last long though, does it?
And no, it doesn't. But it's still weird when you see a palm tree with snow and covered with snow, and it's weird. But it does stay for a day or two, and then of course it's gone. It melts.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's actually longer than I suspected.
Yeah. Well, because we get that cold front, and it can sometimes snap to 20 -20, but
Fuck.
but it doesn't. It can be a few days, and then that's it. But usually the coldest starts. I would say the coldest in Vegas is from mid-December and to mid-January. That's like the coldest.
Yeah.
And then after that, like by the end of January, it already, if you're lucky, if we don't get a second wave, right? Um, it's already nice. So the winters are very
Yes.
short. You can still wear a turtleneck and dress warmly, but it's not freezing. Like
Yeah.
freezing.
Yeah, I've been to Vegas in January and I've been later in the year, and it's definitely much more enjoyable in January.
I agree. I was there in February, and the February there is like perfect weather. It's
Yeah.
maybe. Oh, I'm English, so I think about it in
Wow.
Celsius. So if you're American, do the conversion yourself. But it was like 18 to 25 degrees, and
Yeah.
that swing is lovely. But when it starts hitting like the 40-degree mark, it's like Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
You're like the 60s, 70s.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
comfortable.
Interesting. Okay, so would you rather share a toothbrush with the person of your choice besides a family member, or kiss a stranger?
Now, when you say kiss a stranger, just can it be just on the cheeks, or is it?
No, it's not going to be on the cheeks. We're talking about using a toothbrush or kissing. It's going to be on the mouth, baby.
Um, I'll kiss a stranger.
Hmm.
I would pick that too.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's something about sharing a toothbrush that's just gross,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
Okay, so last one, and this will kind of leeway us in. If you had to use one razor for life, what would it be?
Oh wow.
And it can be any razor. It doesn't have to be a straight razor, right? Or it
Oh,
can.
whatever you want.
Um, well, if it would be
Carve Max.
one, it will probably be my Wade&Butcher straight razor
Good
that I
good
have.
choice.
It's a vintage one and early, late 1800s. But yeah, that would
Oh,
be it.
wow.
Yeah.
Is that the
It's
9/8
that
you
old?
have?
No, it's an 8/8. It's a extra. It's a extra full
Man.
hollow with the original scales.
The original?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
razors date so old, like 1800s or something like that. It's crazy how they're still going now.
and I
Wow.
and I honestly haven't done much to it. Meaning, I cleaned it up but no harsh, nothing. Just kind of,
That's insane.
everything's still original. Um, I kind of nourished the scales because they're horn. So I kept everything original, still the original pins, and there's just something about Sheffield steel that I truly love. It's a special feel, so that would be the one.
This isn't at all relevant. Well, actually, it's incredibly relevant to that. Why do you think it does feel different? Because I've heard so many people say that.
It's the steel. Steel can impart a different feel on your face.
Yeah.
Just like we talked earlier, stainless steel will have a different feel than carbon steel. So, or use a Hitachi white, for example, Japanese steel. Again, you're going to have a different, like a crisp feeling. So depending, and then also the hardness, because you can heat treat a razor like really hard, or you can heat treat it a little softer, and again you'll have a subtle difference in the feel on your face, although it's the same steel.
Wow.
Hmm.
So, so there are all so many variables involved.
Yeah. It definitely seems that
And
way.
Sheffield steel is known to be more buttery, like a buttery
I know
feeling.
what you
It's
mean.
a it's a very velvety, if it's honed properly, and of course, yes, the edge is important, and the stone that you use to hone it up, but there's just something about it that makes it special. To me, it does.
Yeah. And you're
Hmm.
not the first person I've heard that from either, by the way. Whenever I
Yeah,
talk about kind of like a Wade and Butcher or Joseph Rogers, people always say to me, Sheffield Still, it just feels different.
yeah. And there are certain steels that I just can't stand. They're too harsh for me, or they just don't feel right.
What would that still be out of interest?
Swedish steel, for example, I do not like Swedish steel. It's there's just something about it my skin doesn't tolerate. Just And it doesn't matter what stone I use to finish it on. And again, yes, the edge is important, but the steel is important too. And it's just something that I cannot, for whatever reason, I've always avoided Swedish steel. And I've tried different brands. I've honed and I've had so many razors passed through my hands, all these years. I was lucky to be able to try these razors. Some really old and vintage and masterpieces, but you should, eventually you start learning what you like, what you don't like. And for me, from all the razors on the market, vintage, the Sheffield steel, I've always had a love for them.
Wow.
Interesting. That's crazy to think that the blade and everything is from, the 1800s and is still kicking it.
It's funny because when I'm shaving with those things, there's just this ultimate amount of, the way I put it is charm. Like knowing how old this thing is, the things that, if that razor could speak, the amount of stories that razor could tell you, where it's been, who's used it. It's such an interesting thing to be able to use something that's over 200 years old. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, think of all the wars it went through, and just everything that it went through. And if that razor could talk, man, that would be that would be just amazing. The knowledge that razor would be able to tell you.
It's so true.
It's true. It's the history behind it, and then who owned it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that's a commercial, like a mass-produced razor. I don't really know a lot about straight razors, so I may very well be asking some very dumb questions throughout this episode, by the way. But is that the Wade&Butcher? Is that like a commercial brand, I assume?
Yeah, it was a company, and just like we have now Dovo and we have Boker and, and some other companies. And of course, we can only go back as far as whatever information that's available. But apparently, from what I know and what I've read, Wade&Butcher was your typical, regular brand. It wasn't something high end. It was just a brand.
Yeah.
And you had Joseph Rogers. You had a few others, Frederick Reynolds, Greaves. So you had these companies, and then eventually that expanded because that was all in the 1800s. And what's more fascinating is that you can really see the progress that they made, because the early 1800s, most of these razors were very heavy. They were wedges, more wedges.
Yeah.
And you could see also the monkey tail was very short. And you could see as the years progressed, you could see that kind of change. It became more refined, and the tail became a little longer, and they started getting more. The grind started getting a little bit more hollower, and then then you started getting towards the end of the 1800s, and then the early 1900s, and more and more companies came on the market, and then you started getting, of course, the Germans, with a lot of the companies. So it was really a fascinating time. I wish I could have lived back then, and be really in the whole center of straight shaving, because that's the only thing that was available to shave.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating, and I would have loved to just be in one of the factories and see how they make things, and things were made back then. Because it's amazing when I look at these razors, we still make them the same as they did 100 years ago.
It's funny, how mass-produced do you think they were? Because, there are a lot of Wade&Butchers out there. I wonder, do you think they make their razors to a similar process to what you do, or do you think it was, the only way I could put it, excuse the way I put this, but less advanced to what you do because they had less things at their disposal 200 years ago, or?
Right, because now when you look at like Dovo, for example, that's automated. A lot of it is automated. Yeah. Except the grinding is still done by a person that sits behind a grinder and pushes it to a grinder. But everything else is pretty much automated. So back in the old days, because when we watch movies, then we always see them in the woods. They're forging and Yeah, right. And dunking it in brine and and hammering, and so that's pretty much what I started. I thought, oh my God, this is what I'm going to be doing, because I had no idea. People were telling me, oh, you should make razors such and such. And anyway, so but then when I got into it, at first I thought it's kind of like a magical voodoo thing, because the first thing I thought was, oh, this is like, it was hard to explain, but it was, if you try to learn something and you don't know anything about it, you have to learn it, right? So you got to start somewhere. And then when I started, getting into the books and reading up and asking questions, and then my eyes really opened, because although it seemed very daunting at first, it really isn't. It really isn't. But you need to learn. Of course, you need to learn, like everything else. You need to learn how to what the steel is about, and what happens with the steel. So there's a lot of So now when I look back and I see these movies where they're forging, I know exactly what they're doing, because I do it myself and I've learned how to do it. So I know the logic behind it. But I don't know how they did it back in the 1800s in terms of
Yeah.
mass producing, because they didn't have the automations
No.
that we have.
And
So
there are a lot of those razors out there, right? So they'd have had to. Do you think it was just man hours?
that's what I think.
Yeah. That's
I
crazy.
mean, there's not really. I mean, they must have had small factories,
You'd think.
but again, we're talking early 1800s. So yes, they didn't have the luxury that we have now,
No.
with big
Yeah.
machine and automation and robots and other things, where you can just make 100 raises at a time. Um, so yes, I think there was much more labor involved. Man,
Yeah. I mean, they were probably like the Gillette of their time, right? Like as far as like one of the go-to like mass brands around is what it sounds like. I'm not sure how old Gillette
That,
is. I'm
that's
gonna write that
that's
down because it's
actually an
interesting to look.
incredible, valuable point. So if you think about it, like let's say Wade and Butcher were producing razors back then, like in the early 1800s, mid 1800s. Would people in Brazil, as a random example, been using a Wade and Butcher? Because there weren't many, manufacturers of straight razors around. And it's crazy to think about it, like the amount of logistics that fit in to
right,
then producing and then shipping around the world and then kind of everything like that. So long ago, those logistics are made way more complicated, mainly due to the fact that, you know, most things that are made now have some degree of automation in them, especially when they're mass produced like that. But then it's so easy to reach all the corners of the world now. Like, let's say if I'm Wade and Butcher and I produce these 100 razors and I want to get them to South America, those razors become more of a luxury then, because I know if that 100 razors need to reach there, it's going to take weeks,
Hmm.
and they might not even arrive. So it's just a crazy difference, and really when you think about it, how lucky like the manufacturers are now to be able to automate all of this stuff, because as you just
right.
said, it's very likely that they were just putting in hard graft to make all of that stuff, and near the end of the 1800s, they managed to get that hard graph down to like really tight refinement. It's so interesting to me, that sort of thing, because it just shows how much we've advanced in terms of how we make things.
It's true. It's true, and people take it for granted. But again, the I still, if I had to choose, if I had to, let's say that I'm not talking a custom razor, or but if I have to choose between buying a new production razor, something that's being produced right now, and mass produced, or use an old vintage razor that has soul and character, and I'd rather choose the old vintage razor.
Yeah,
Um, because not only, not only, in my opinion, is the steel of a higher quality, but it has a history. And if you think about it, you're shaving with something that's, let's say 100 years old, and it's still, you can still shave with it.
Hmm.
it's still doing its
It stood
job.
the test of time, right? Like it's still living, which is
The
crazy.
only thing you might have to change are the scales. The hand, they might have been broken, or you replace them, or um, you can restore most of those razors if they're rusted or they have some pitting, or and then some people just leave it because it has charm
Yeah.
and it's part of why bother. Um, but yeah, if I had to choose between spending $100 or $150 on a new production razor that my neighbor can have and everyone has, and as opposed to something that's more special, I'd rather get the special one.
Me too, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as like talking about history of straight razors, let's talk about like your history and how you started, because before we started recording, we were doing a little chit chatting, and there were a few like really interesting
Yeah.
points that came up that I think, I'm sure that other people don't know as well. So how did you kind of like, what transitioned you into like what you were initially like going, like your education was, and how did that transition you into razor making and some of these like beautiful pieces that you do today?
Well, I mean, we would probably have to go back to my younger years. So like we explained earlier and talked about, I started polishing diamonds. I pretty much grew up, Antwerp, which is one of the diamond capital of the world, one of the major cities in the world for diamonds. Um, and so I went to school, and I went to diamond school. So I studied. Well, I learned polishing diamonds. Did that for 2 years, and then the third year I went to my cousin who taught me to cleave diamonds, and I got really good at it. So I did that for 10 years. And then being in the diamond industry, I was in the jewelry, around, surrounded by jewelry. I mean, I was dealing and dealing, and then doing the diamonds, and got into jewelry. So, so I've always been kind of very meticulous about my
Yeah.
work and very precise. I think maybe that's part of why I'm also so precise, with my work. Um, and then, um, and then my father, he was an interior architect, so he had a shop, and he would make everything himself. Like, I mean, not only was he an architect, but he would also make the furniture. He would make walk-in closets. He would make
Oh,
chairs.
wow.
I mean, he was, a carpenter at the same time. I mean, he was very good with his hands, and so I used to, spend time with him in the shop and learn. And he had a paint room, and I mean, he had just everything. So I learned, I saw him working, and so I think that's also part of the preciseness, and just being able to work with your hands, and you're born with it. Which I think it's you're either good with your hands or you're not. Um, so anyway, that was pretty much my whole upbringing, and then later in life, and I also did some web design at some point in my life. Did that for many years. I always had the eye for detail, and so I was always attracted by it. And then what happened was that when I started, because I've been shaving with a straight razor since I was 18.
Fucking hell.
Oh, wow.
So that's what
Jeez.
and that was in 2. And when I started, there was no internet, there was no World Wide Web, and I'll never forget. It was a Puma. I went to a little hunting store in Antwerp, and I bought a Puma, and I was all excited. When I grew up watching the westerns, and I still grew up watching black and white television.
Yeah.
So I watched all the westerns, and I always thought it was cool when they were using a straight razor, and I think that's kind of how I kind of was attracted to it. And so anyway, I was 18. I bought my first razor, and I went home, and I was all excited, right? And I'm all ready. I got lettering. I mean, I have everything ready, and I lettered up, and
What
um,
did you use to
and
lather?
it was uh, it was called. Oh, Now I'm hitting a blank. It's a bore. I mean, remember, because I still have my bore brush, so I still have my
Whoa.
original that
Oh, wow.
I have that one. Um, but I forgot what the name of the soap was. That's too long ago. Um, it wasn't Can-Do that I remember.
No.
It was a proper soap, but um, I forgot. It wasn't Williams, but it was something similar.
Okay.
Uh, but I forgot what the name was. But anyway, so I know, and I go with my first pass, and I'm like nothing. So I look at the razor, and of course it was blunt. Back then, the razors did not come shave ready; they just came
Oh,
with,
Yeah.
wow.
if you're lucky, a factory edge. But this one has nothing. It had nothing. It was just blunt. So I didn't know what to do. I was at a loss. And no, I mean, so I went to my local barber and I explained it to him, and then so he sat down with me and he sharpened it up for me, and he showed me the ropes, how to sharpen. He showed me how to strop, and so I went home at my first shave, which was like an eye opener, and I got hooked immediately, and I went back a few times. He taught me how to hone properly. And then from there on, I pretty much used a straight razor my whole life. Now I also use a D, occasionally, and because I still have my Ds from when I was 16, 17. I still have my D.
Wow.
Dude, do you know how cool that is? Like,
Yeah,
you don't hear that from many people.
right.
Man.
And I still have my dad's too. I still have some of his tools. I mean, shaving tools.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I pretty much, and then, but there was no, again, then the internet started, early 90s, 92, I think it was. Um, and, and then you had at first you had the chats. There weren't really any forums out there. Everything was the internet relay chat, and all the rooms, and then the first shaving forums kind of came, to the surface. Um, and then I remember there were two main ones, which was Badger and Blade and Straight Razor Place. Those were the two main forums that came, that was the 2000s. And Straight Razor Place was mostly about straight razors, and then Badger and Blade was mostly about double edges.
Yeah.
And they were kind of competitors, these two. They were always kind of competing. Uh, but then, I joined. At first, I started with Badger and Blade because I don't remember why, but I started with Badger and Blade, and then I noticed, Straight Razor Place at the razors. So then, I joined both, and and then of course you start meeting people, and um, so we weren't that many at that time. We were just, a few, but it grew. It was a nice group, and then I started. I just said, hey, like, why shouldn't I just start restoring? I had a few razors laying around, and I said, hey, I should start restoring those. So when I started making, like everyone else, we started with wood because it's an easy material to work with.
Yeah.
I started making my nails, and one thing led to another, and then I said, here, let's add a buffer, and let's add this, and let's add that, right? And in the beginning, I wasn't really charging because you can't put a price, plus you're learning, right? And I wasn't really doing it for the money either. It was more like a hobby thing,
Mm-hmm.
and and then people were, they were sending me their razors, and I would do it for them, and then they would pay me. What do you want? I say, whatever. And then they would send me a bottle of, bourbon or scotch or a cigar or, whatever. It wasn't really for the money. Um, but then, I started getting a little better at it, and then I had to buy more tools, because every time you got to
Yeah.
buy tools. So, and then eventually I came to a point where, I was producing some really nice work. And like anything else, it's not that you can go to school and teach, learn.
No.
There's no specific classes you can follow. You have to really learn it by yourself. So that's what I did. And so anyway, I perfected that. Started adding different scale materials, got better at just restoring blades. And I did that for many years, many years. And I got, I got good at it, and people were happy with the work. And then I had a lot of customers that kept saying, hey, Max, why don't you start with making straight razors? And I'm like, oh, uh, I don't know about that. That's too far.
Yeah.
That's like, again, that was for me that imaginary world where I saw myself in a wood and hammering and anyway, so I started digging into the subject and then for the first year I learned I wanted to learn about steel, so I started getting into metallurgy,
Oh wow.
knowing what it's about, how it reacts, how it's made. I mean, just knowing what you're working with. So I did that for a long time, and then also asking questions to the right people. There were some good knife makers out there. I started asking them, just getting the information that I needed. Watched some videos, read books, um, and then slowly I bought my first grinder and just everything that I needed. Started slowly adding all those things together and made my first razor. I'll never forget that feeling when you make your first razor. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have it anymore. You would always think I would have kept it, but I actually someone bought it, which was pretty cool because it wasn't. I mean, it shaved.
Yeah.
You know, as you look at your first creation, you think that's the bomb, right? Of course, if I would look back now, I would like probably scratch my head and think like, how. But um, but no, I was happy. I mean, I was able to take a piece of steel and turn it into a sharp
Yeah.
object. It was like, which was like really surprising to me. And then I said, hey, it's not as, I mean, of course, you still got to learn, but it kind of helped me not be that scared about it and just know that, hey, I can do
Yeah.
this. But of course, yes, they're still learning because you need to learn the proper heat treat and how the steel needs to be treated, and certain steel would need a different formula, the way they need to be treated and heat and stuff like that. So that progressed, and then I started making, I started doing still the restorations, started adding the custom razors, um, and that eventually grew but I have to be honest. I remember there was a maker that once said, "Grind your first 100 razors and then come back to me and talk." And I thought, like, what is he talking about? It's easy, right? Because I just made my first one,
Yeah.
right? But well, it really grinding takes years and years. I've been doing it for years, and I still sometimes uh, learn something new that I after all these years that you think like, huh. So it just feels like you just progress and you get better the more you do it,
Yeah.
but um, it does take years. It really does. It's not something that yes, you can make something, first. I'm sure when you made your silk the first year was great, but now that you've learned, you're years ahead of your time, right? You've adapted your formulas, you've adapted your
Yeah.
technique, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
To your first base, and it was great, but if you compare your first base with your base now,
Yeah.
so that's the way I see it, the way I look at it is that I have progressed and I've gotten better, but it's taken many, many, many years. And I'm still a firm believer that you start from the bottom, meaning you don't. A lot of people, I think that the mistake they do is they say, "Oh, I want to do this," and then they jump right in without really, starting with the fundamentals.
Yes.
And
Same with soap making.
yeah, you have to know
Yeah.
your foundation and
Hmm.
don't skip that. And for me, I think the blessing was that I restored razors for
I
four
was
or
about
five
to say
years.
that. I think the restoration process perfectly set you up to start making those razors properly, and I imagine that was very valuable.
It did because I truly perfected my scale making, my
Yeah.
peening. Um, I mean, I worked with so many razors that came through my hand. I learned the geometry. Every time I had a razor, I measured the hardness. You learn what a razor should look like, what it should feel like, what it should be like. And I've had all these. I mean, I probably had thousands of razors pass through my hand, be it for sharpening or just restoration or rescaling. And I've learned a lot. I truly have. And yes, it for me, that was very important, because as soon as for me, the hardest part with making the razors was not finishing, was just making the razor itself. But the scales and making the rest was easy, because I already mastered that.
You were so used to that, yeah. That's
Well,
what you were used to, and then the new parts are the things you had to get used to. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
The only thing I had to focus on was, grinding and heat treat and, getting the proper, geometry and, so the razor part was important, but then, dressing it up, that was the easy part.
Yeah. Well, and not that they're similar crafts at all, but with any craft, I think, whether even like cooking, if you don't learn the fundamentals and the base at the beginning and learn it right, you can't help yourself later. So like, you can't help troubleshoot. You can't figure out what you did wrong.
Incredibly good point.
Right?
There's no reference there, is there?
Shit just doesn't work, and then you don't know how to fix it, and you're like, I don't know what to do. So if you take the shortcut and you miss all those steps, you really just like hurt yourself in the long run, because you don't know how to walk it back to correct what went wrong or to fix this one particular aspect that you may not like about it. So it really is aggravating whenever I see people that do that, and they just went the shortcut, and it's like, anybody can make soap, but can you make soap the right way and learn how to fix it whenever it's wrong without hurting somebody in the process? It's
same thing with a weakness. If you're making something and you cannot always excel at everything. Some things you have to learn, and get better at. So if you have a weakness, work on that weakness.
right.
Get better, get better. Try to make sure that that you find the problem and get good at it. And then once you're good at it, then, because everything that you do is, especially with what I do, is muscle memory.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard, once you have a bad habit, it's hard to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better to to learn your bad, to know what your mistakes are and try to get better at those. And once that's done, then you can move on to the next step.
Yeah. Do you have any employees? Have you ever helped like train somebody? Have you ever trained somebody to help you at all?
Not with razors. I did in the diamonds.
Yeah.
I had I after the cleaving, I did that for many years. I had an apprentice who I taught how to, cleave diamonds.
As a perfectionist, it's stressful, right?
But with the razor, it's very stressful. Not so much that I don't trust anyone else, but the thing is, if someone orders a razor from me, he wants it made by me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a Max Sprecher anymore when your apprentice makes it. Yeah.
If I will have another person make a razor for me, although I supervise or whatever whatever he does, it's not done by me.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about this logically, right? When you buy a razor of yours, you're not just buying what that razor looks like or the feel of that razor. You're buying the love and expertise that goes into making that thing. And what a lot of people forget, and it is something very obvious when it comes to like makers of even soap, safety razors, in your case, straight razors, you're not just paying for that product. You're paying for the expertise that goes in that product. Because there's a certain amount of skill or time that person has to kind of envelope or just pile into making your thing, where if someone said, oh, like, there's this new guy that started, his razors might look similar to Max's, versus Max, who's been doing this for 20 years, you're buying Max's expertise when you buy a razor there. Let's say if you call up Max and say, hey, Max, I'm struggling to shave with this. I don't know if the edge is good. Well, the edge is good because you've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. There's a level of expertise there to fall back on. And ultimately, I think that's a huge part of the value of where your product is as a whole. And I think a lot of people lose that. They look at it like they're buying a razor, but they are buying a razor, but what they're doing is they're buying the expertise that has gone into making that tool. And for me, that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, you're whenever you pay for an artisan product, this is something people need to realize. It doesn't matter what the product is. It's the same with paying a chef to cook your dinner. You're not paying for the time that it takes to make that item. You're not paying for the ingredients and the supply costs that it takes to make that product. You're paying for their years of research and wasted materials and wasted supplies and time and, you know, hours and hours and hours of just practice and wasted effort. And it's not wasted effort because you learn from it, but you're paying for their education, basically. You're paying for that experience. So you're not necessarily paying for, I don't know, say, I'm throwing numbers out here. Say it takes you 8 hours. I'm sure it's much longer, but say it takes you 8 hours to pay for a razor. You're not paying for 8 hours of labor. You're paying for 8 hours of labor, but with 20 years of experience to get where you are, to take that 8 hours of labor versus 20 hours of labor to do that. So same with the mechanic or anybody, right? You're paying for their knowledge and their know-how. Like, people lose that with the artisan side of it. I think sometimes they lose that perspective that we've come a long way. You know, you don't pay so much money for a Rembrandt because of the way it looks. You pay that much money for a Rembrandt because, you know, the name that comes with it, the time, and, you know, everything that comes with the finished product.
Right. It's a package.
It is. And I think a big part of that, when it comes to kind of making that specific product anyway, is exactly going back to what Heather just said, you know. You may be paying for the cost of the scales, the cost of the material, but quite honestly, there's a massive value, in my opinion, that should be placed on the amount of skill and time that person has put into developing that. And that is kind of where you get those like revered brands in terms of quality, because those brands are built on expertise. They're built on kind of like a backlog of quality, not just, I've just started, I know a bit about what I'm doing. Anything you get from me is going to be an experiment. No, I know what I'm doing. This is a refined process, and you're paying for that refined process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Let's move on slightly. Your razors, from my perspective, look quite different to most people's. Very much in your style. I like to think Max has his own specific style and his own design approach. What do you think are the biggest things that have influenced the way your razors actually look?
Well, I think for me the most important. Well, first of all, I have a European background, so I was raised in Europe, and I lived in many countries, and so I explore different cultures and history, and I've been surrounded by art, because we have to be honest. Europe has a little bit more art than the U.S. has.
A little bit? Come on, Max.
A little bit.
I was always around art, and I lived in a cosmopolitan city.
Yeah.
And fashionable, and so it's a little bit different, but that's what I was used to. Italian cars. And then of course you get the German craftsmanship. So you have all these different styles, and so for me, I think what primes is function. It needs to function. It needs to be. You need to be able to use it properly. And and I'm half German, so of course that German craftsmanship needs to be in there. Which is what people call the perfection. It's just the little things. But I've always been a person that even my dress code and everything that I live with is classic. I like classic things, because there's no time limit on a classic piece. Classic will never go out of style. So I try to keep, my style. I try to keep it simple, but simple doesn't always mean it's easy.
No.
So I try to keep that European background in there, where in my style, which is just a very elegant, simple,
Yes.
classic, timeless, and most importantly, functional. Because at the end of the day, it's a tool. You want to use it, and it needs to make you happy. You need to have a smile on your face when you use it and be happy. And that's beside the fact that it needs to be properly made. But as an object, because I get a lot of customers that when they order my razors, and these are all repeat customers, and the first thing they tell me, Max, every time I go in a bathroom and I shave with one of yours, it makes me happy.
Yeah.
What a great compliment, though.
Well, I can attest to that. Like, I've used them myself, and although you're not saying this, Max, because you're a modest, humble guy, for me, there's nothing that compares. Like, this was my first razor, and I went to pick it up, and I stopped by Max's house. I met him for the first time. I opened up this case, and it was just like, this is a whole new world being introduced to me. And I started shaving with that, and that was my first straight razor. And ever since then, like, whenever I pick something up, that experience has ruined my expectations of everything else. Because it's kind of like, well, it's not the Sprecher. It's good, but it's not this. Which is why most of the straight razors I own are yours. Because it's like, I'm going to use this analogy. It's like driving a Ferrari, and then for fun, I decide to pick up a Fiat.
Yeah.
The Fiat gets me from A to B, but it doesn't have the amount of, I guess it doesn't bring me the same amount of joy. And I think a lot of that is the elegance, as you said, kind of, as soon as you said elegance, that really popped into my head. And that is exactly how I would define the way you create things. There's no misalignment. There's no lines that are crazy. It's something that even in 200 years that would still be attractive. For me, I look at some of the customs now, and they look, for lack of a better term, fucking wild. And I don't think that design doesn't really suit my preferences per se.
It becomes a personal choice.
Yeah.
Because there are people that like more different style, like you just said. So there's different styles out there. So I think at the end of the day, it becomes a personal, what you're attracted to. We all have our preferences. But and I always believe, like, for example, there's a few makers out there, they have a style, and it's not my style.
No, not mine.
But I can compliment them on the work itself, meaning, there's there can be a fit and finish that is, but it's maybe not my style.
Yeah.
But
you can still appreciate the work.
Right, but I can appreciate the work, because I know what it takes to make it, and but it's not my style. But I'll never downgrade it just because I like it. It's just, hey, this is gorgeous, but it's not my style.
It's down to preference, isn't it?
Like, all down to.
I think.
I know people that don't like, that think my style is too bland or too simple for them, because they like more the wild things. There are some razors I've seen that, I mean, Batman should have it on his belt. It's just. The problem with and I see that even with shaving brushes. Lately I've seen shaving brushes that look gorgeous, but not functional.
Yeah, I know.
Put a beautiful material on there. It's gorgeous, and it's a piece of art. You would put it on a display, but then I can't imagine shaving with it. It's like taking a bowling ball and putting a 24 millimeter knot on there. It doesn't make any sense, right? So it needs to be, but there are people that like that. So again, it's a big world. There's a lot of choice out there, and that's the good. I think that's the good thing. We live in this wet shaving industry right now. Is the choices that we have.
Yeah.
Huge amount of variety.
There's a huge amount of variety.
And I mean I've done straight raise shaves and I have a couple of them, but I don't have anything too fancy because they would collect dust from me for the most part. But I will say that your razors, I'm with Jack. There's some of the most gorgeous, like, and they're almost like a statement piece. It's like the little black dress for a woman, you know, like they're a statement piece that are in the center of collections, and things from the, you know, the not just the edge, but like the spine and the scales just have, they all kind of have a little bit of the same look to them, even though they're different. Like you kind of can, I can kind of pick them out in a picture, I think, from a lot of the shave of the days.
They stand out.
Yeah, they do. They stand out, but the spine work that you do is gorgeous. The scales are gorgeous. And for someone who's not using them to appreciate the like functionality of them, I can definitely appreciate that you have. And do you think some of that edge, that detail work that you do as far as like the look on that comes from like your jewelry background and like, you know, happen to have that edge of like like totally blanking out here, like that detail eye.
I think so. I don't know if it has to do really with the diamond or the jewelry. I think an eye for you know, a good eye. I think it's something you're born with. I think it's something you have, and you can train it. You know, like even little things. I see everything. Even, you know, I mean, I've got to, for example, I do have to, you know, for reading, I have to wear, you know, reading glasses. But I can still see a fly, you know, 200 yards away, which is, you know, by way of speech, of course. But I see everything, the little things, you know. People always hated me for that because I could always see, you know, everything. And so women always hate me because of that. You have a wrinkle there, or you have, you know, you have a zit there, or I see everything. You couldn't hide anything from me. But even I have the same you know, when I make the razors, I start doing my firework. Sometimes I see little things that a normal person would never see. That something in my brain goes, uh-oh, this should not be there, or this is, you know, you need to fix this. And um, I have to, because if I don't, it'll drive me crazy. And
That is the definition
yeah,
of a perfectionist.
it'll drive me crazy. And honestly, 99% of the people would never notice.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
I know. And it's important for me. I've had sometimes where I'll make something and then you know, everything's done, everything's perfect. I mean, it passed my quality control, and then at the end, I'm gonna, you know, I'm ready to package it, and for whatever reason, the light shines, you know, and I get a reflection, and I see something, like it's so minor, and I'm like, and then I have to go back and try to, you know, fix it. I mean, and again, it is so small that a normal person would never see it.
And you're just like, I can't send it out. It's not right. I can't do it.
And I have to go and you know, fix it.
Yeah.
And it's something that I would never have known. I mean, I didn't see it. And so if I already don't see it, you know, it means, you know, it's not there. But then for some reason it shows up to a certain angle, and then I'm like, uh-oh. So those things can drive me crazy.
So what is your favorite material to use for the scales? Like, what is your like dream like look for scales? Like if you were designing one for you.
It's the shell.
Yeah.
Shell. I'm you know, I'm in love with shell. I've always been in love with shell, but you know, I love the ocean. But shell has always been, you know, I still love. I mean, for me, it would be shell. Yeah, be it abalone, the pawa, the awabi, you know, the mother of pearl. So yeah, that's definitely my choice, and that's also my most popular. I think most people that order from me, you know, because I offer other materials, you know, and I offer cheaper, and but people always go for the shell.
Yeah, the color is very eye-catching. Like
it's so Max Sprecher though. Like
when
you
see
that abalone, that is a Max Sprecher razor. I don't even need to see the stamp on it, like your stamp on it. I know that's yours.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was looking at your razors for a long time before I bought one, I was thinking, like, that's such an interesting scale material. I had no idea what it was, but it's just so unique, and it screams like that's something you specialize in. I love it.
Yeah, you do a lot of that scalloped spine as well, right?
What I tend to do, I've noticed that I come up with something and then I'll for whatever, for whatever reason, I'll make something and I'm not thinking like, like this is, going to be a hit or people going to like it. And then for whatever reason, people go crazy about it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, okay. So then I'll do it again, and then now I have so many orders, people asking for the scalloped as a firework.
It's very pretty.
And again, I mean, I had done it a few times, but a long time ago. And then I don't know, just for whatever reason, I decided to do it again. And maybe this was the right time. People caught up on it, and yeah, now people they'll order something and say, I want that scallop look. So, but then I'll come up. I already started kind of on a variant on that. So I'll take it. And again, how do these designs come? I don't know. They just suddenly I'll be sitting there and staring, and yeah, I'll try this. Let's try this.
Well, kind of when I order a razor from you, it's kind of like, I want this, but I trust your artistic approach. So I'll say, I want this, but kind of just put your own spin on it and kind of do what you want, because I know kind of whatever comes out of that is going to be beautiful anyway. And it's that scallop design really, I guess, lends itself to the elegance of the razor overall.
Mm-hmm.
It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Like I said, I already started on a variant, just kind of taking that at the basis, but then starting to upgrade a little bit, coming up with new designs. And then also sometimes with firework, I'll start with my first notch, first firework, and then I just get carried away and I start, I just let my mind do whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
And get carried away.
Someone will buy it, Max. Don't worry.
I mean, I've had pieces where I'm like, I'll never be able to, reproduce this. How in the hell did I do this?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I have my standard kind of designs that I, keep doing because I've been tested and they work, and I measure everything too, because you got to make sure everything is not just willy-nilly, and so yeah, again, you got to, that's the perfection part where you try.
I don't think people know like how much level of detail goes into you doing that firework. Let's say if I said to you, Max, I want you to do some firework. What's the process of that? Like, how does that actually work?
Well, you first have to, the way I would do it, like if you would say, well, I want my firework on the spine and the tank, for example.
Yeah.
Or, a full firework, whatever. You first have to start, I make grids, like I'll have to divide everything. So I'll already start with dividing, everything, like say every inch, make a line, and, I'll put a line in the middle. I mean, and when I say line, it's like a scribe, I'll scribe. So basically you divide everything. So that's already your grid. It's like having a grid.
Yeah.
That's already part of the precision. And then, you take calipers and you start measuring and, where you want everything to fall and where it needs to be. And so that's...
The calipers blow me away. Like, I imagine with your personality, even like, because you know how precise calipers are, there's no way the eye can see much of a difference between what those calipers can tell.
Right.
But they add just a different level of precision on that, and that's so you.
Because you can really measure the exact distance, by the millimeter, by 1,000th of a millimeter if you had to. But I don't usually go that crazy. But as long as I'm, within the range, I'm happy.
Yeah. And
a lot of it too is just the eyes. I can see when things are off. I don't even need I wouldn't even need a caliper. I could sometimes it happens where I'll do something and then I'll start to do something different. So I have to eyeball it.